So when you picture an ancient civilization, your mind probably jumps straight to, like, the classic Hollywood blockbuster version.
Oh, absolutely. We've all seen the movies.
Right. It's always this world neatly divided into two absolute extremes. On one side, you have these godlike kings draped in jade and quetzal feathers, just ruling from towering stone palaces.
And then on the other side, it's just this massive, nameless crowd of destitute peasants just toiling away in the mud.
Exactly. The visual is always binary. It's kings and commoners, and there's absolutely nothing in between.
Yeah, it's a very persistent, very dramatic narrative. I think human beings, it's just like history,
Yeah.
to be categorized cleanly. You know, the rulers and the ruled, the billionaires up in the sky and the totally impoverished down on the ground.
Right.
And for a very long time, that was actually the prevailing academic view of the ancient Maya, too.
But today, we are going to completely shatter that stereotype.
We really are.
The mission for today's deep dive is to explore a fascinating part of history that just rewrites the script entirely. We're going to look at the incredible and honestly really surprising evidence for a prosperous, upwardly mobile middle class in the ancient northern Maya regions.
It really changes everything we thought we knew.
It does. We're going to compare the staggering wealth of these forgotten hilltop estates to the humble homes of the ancient past. And we are going to look at the hard science that proves everyday people were actually building generational wealth.
Yeah, and to understand how we, missed this middle class for so long, you really have to look at the tools of archaeology itself.
Because we were literally just missing them.
Exactly. For centuries, explorers understandably focused their attention on the massive monuments, the towering pyramids of Tikal, the huge ball courts of Chichen Itza.
Which, they are spectacular.
They are. But those monuments only tell the story of the absolute top fraction of 1%. It wasn't until the arrival of new technologies, specifically LIDAR, that the narrative actually began to shift.
I am so obsessed with LiDAR. For you listening, imagine flying over a Central American jungle so incredibly dense that it just looks like a solid ocean of green leaves.
Just an impenetrable canopy.
Right. In the old days, archaeologists had to literally hack through that vegetation with machetes, just hoping they might accidentally trip over a pyramid.
Which is incredibly inefficient.
Yeah.
And sweaty.
Yeah, totally.
But LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, it completely changes the physics of discovery. So an aircraft flies over that dense canopy and it shoots hundreds of thousands of laser pulses per second down at the ground.
Per second. That's just wild.
Right. And most of those lasers, they just hit the leaves and bounce back. But a tiny fraction of them find the little gaps in the canopy and hit the actual forest floor.
And then when you take that data and run it through an algorithm to digitally strip away all the trees, you are left with this perfect, naked, 3D topographical map of the ground.
It is literally giving archaeologists X-ray vision.
That's so cool.
And suddenly, by stripping away that jungle, LIDAR is letting us see the missing middle of these ancient societies that we have literally been walking blindly past for decades. It's revealing a landscape that's just densely packed with complex infrastructure.
So get ready, because today's exploration is full of ancient 9th century McMansions, high-tech rain catchers, and the 1,200-year-old dental records that actually prove the Maya dream was a very real thing.
Though I think to truly appreciate why finding a Maya middle class is such a shocking paradigm shift, we first have to establish the baseline.
Right, we have to know what normal was.
Exactly. We need to look at how the other 90%, the commoners, actually lived throughout most of Maya history, particularly down in the southern lowlands during the Classic period.
Let's get into the dirt, literally, because the daily life of a commoner was heavily defined by the very houses they lived in. And unlike the stone pyramids that survived for millennia, commoner homes were basically built to disappear.
Yeah, they were constructed from highly perishable materials. The primary method was wattle and daub.
Wattle and daub.
Right. So you take vertical wooden poles, you weave smaller sticks between them horizontally, kind of like a basket, and then you coat the whole thing in adobe.
Which is essentially just mud strengthened with straw or grass, right?
Exactly. Top that with a thatched roof made of dried palm fronds, and you have a standard commoner house.
But they couldn't just build these directly on the jungle floor, could they? They had to construct these low stone platforms first.
Yeah, they did.
And this wasn't for aesthetic reasons, like having a nice patio. It was purely a survival strategy.
It was absolutely essential for water management. The Maya lowlands experience intense torrential rainy seasons.
Like monsoon-level rain.
Exactly. If you build a mud house directly on the ground, The rising floodwaters and the constant dampness will literally dissolve your walls and rot your wooden posts within a single season.
Which sounds miserable.
It would be.
Yeah.
So raising the house on a stone platform kept the living space dry. But because the structures themselves were almost entirely biodegradable, they just vanished back into the jungle centuries ago. Today, you were mostly just left with a slight rectangular elevation in the dirt.
Which is why they were so easy to miss before LiDAR. But these were the people who formed the absolute backbone of the society. They did all the heavy lifting, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible.
Yes, literally lifting heavy things.
Ancient Central America had 0 pack animals. No horses, no oxen, no donkeys. I think the largest mammal walking around was the shy tapir, which you certainly cannot hitch to a cart.
No, you definitely cannot. And the absence of beasts of burden is a crucial point regarding the physical toll of being a commoner.
Right, because everywhere else.
In Europe or Asia, exactly. The domestication of large animals was a massive driver of civilizational progress. They provided the horsepower, literally, to move mountains.
Even the Inca down in South America had llamas to carry weight over the Andes.
Right. But for the Maya, every single stone block cut for a towering pyramid, every heavy load of firewood, every ear of maize harvested, it was all transported on human backs.
And they used a technology called a tump line for that, right?
They did. It's essentially a wide strap worn across the forehead, and it attaches to a heavy load resting on the lower back.
I've seen pictures of those. It shifts the weight off the shoulders and directly down the spinal column.
It's incredibly efficient mechanically.
Sure, but imagine the caloric output. Imagine the spinal compression. I mean, my back hurts just thinking about it.
It was brutal.
Plus, on top of all that manual labor, they were paying heavy taxes to the elite in the form of their own crops and hunted game.
It was a grueling existence. It was focused really heavily on basic subsistence and just serving the state.
I always think about it like this. Imagine a scenario where future historians dig up a modern city in 1,000 years. But in this scenario, only the billionaires' reinforced concrete penthouses survive the centuries.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Right. While all the middle-class suburbs, the apartment buildings, and the modest homes, they just dissolve into dust. Those future historians would look at the ruins and incorrectly assume that humanity consisted of a few ultra-rich people living in sky towers, and everyone else must have just lived outside in biodegradable tents.
That is the exact trap archaeologists fell into for generations.
Because they only saw the stone.
Exactly. By only seeing the stone palaces that survived, they assumed a massive, impoverished peasant population simply supported a tiny royal elite.
So if the peasants are living in these melting mud huts and the kings are in giant stone jalouses, where exactly is the evidence for this supposed middle class? Like, where are we looking on the map for this deep dive?
Well, we have to move north. We leave the biodegradable huts of the southern lowlands and travel up to the lush Puc region of the northern Yucatan Peninsula.
Okay, heading north.
This is where that entire billionaire and peasant narrative completely falls apart.
Which brings us to a forgotten Maya town identified in our sources as Kiwik, spelled Kiuic, but pronounced Kiwi.
Right, Kiwi.
And when archaeologists first started mapping Kiwi, they assumed it was a standard small settlement, right? Just limited to a little core area around a central pyramid.
That was the initial thought, yeah.
But then LiDAR mapping peeled back the jungle canopy just outside the town center, and it revealed this sprawling hilltop estate that researchers dubbed Stairway to Heaven.
The sheer scale of this estate is staggering when you remember that it was not a royal palace.
Yeah, paint a picture of it for us.
So it sits atop a 200-foot hill. At the base, there's an enormous monumental stairway leading all the way up to the summit, where they constructed a massive 9 to 10 room mansion.
It is literally a 9th century McMansion. It's huge. But having a big house on a hill isn't even the most mind-blowing part of the Kiwi discovery, is it?
Far from it. The real game changer was the architecture surrounding that main mansion. Spread across this estate were dozens of secondary buildings. These were homes belonging to skilled workers, extended family, maybe estate managers. And the crucial detail that changes everything we know about Maya social structure, these secondary homes were built out of stone.
Wait, stone construction for non-royals?
Yes.
That is a massive flex. Because stone meant permanence, sure, but more importantly, stone meant unimaginable wealth in that society.
To understand why it's such a flex, you have to look at the thermodynamic cost of Maya stone architecture.
The thermodynamic cost, I love that term.
It's so accurate, though, because it's not just a matter of stacking rocks. To bind those stones together and to coat the walls and floors, the Maya used a thick plaster called stucco.
Right.
And to make that stucco, you have to mine limestone, crush it, and burn it to alter its chemical structure into quicklime.
And to burn limestone, you need heat, like a ridiculous amount of heat.
You have to heat the limestone to about 900 degrees Celsius. In a world without coal or industrial furnaces, the only way to achieve that is by burning green wood from the surrounding jungle. Some estimates suggest that to produce a single ton of quicklime, the Maya had to burn up to 5 tons of wood.
5 tons of wood for 1 ton of quicklime. That is a staggering amount of deforestation just to plaster a house.
It really is.
It requires legions of workers chopping down trees, hauling them with those tump lines we talked about, managing massive kilns for days. The sheer invisible labor required to make that stone waterproof and pristine is just mind-boggling. It wasn't something a common peasant farmer could ever access.
Exactly. It required a massive mobilization of resources.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate for a sec. Let's look at European history. Kings gave land to their cousins and favored nobles all the time.
Sure.
How do we know these Kiwi residents aren't just minor royals? Like maybe the king's second cousin just got a really nice plot of land on a hill.
It's a very logical leap to make, and archaeologists had to rule that out. But when you zoom out and look at the regional surveys of the Puke region, the answer becomes incredibly clear.
What did they find?
Stairway to Heaven wasn't an isolated anomaly. Researchers found dozens and dozens of these sprawling stone estates scattered across the hills. We are looking at a demographic reality where this level of wealth and prosperity was spread over almost half the population in this area.
Wait, half the population living in stone estates?
Yes.
That completely flips the script. That is the literal definition of a middle class.
It points to a highly complex society where everyday people, not just those born into the royal bloodline, had opportunities to acquire land, manage vast agricultural operations, and build substantial multi-generational wealth.
Wow.
They were living what scholars call the Maya dream, a full millennium before we see the emergence of North America's colonial middle class.
The Maya dream.
Yeah.
I love that. But having a big stone house is just the architectural shell. To truly prove these people were a prosperous, thriving middle class, we need to look at what was happening inside those houses, right?
Absolutely.
Like, how were they actually living on a daily basis? What was their standard of living?
And for that, archaeology requires us to look beneath the floors.
Oh, this is hands down one of the most fascinating details from the sources. So archaeologists are digging beneath the floor level of a 3-room elite residence up at the Stairway to Heaven estate.
Right.
And they uncover these large, heavy capstones. Beneath them, they find a dedicatory offering, a ceramic bowl, and an upside-down plate. And when they carefully lift that upside-down plate, they find the degraded, eroded fragments of human bone, including pieces of a human skull.
Now, to clarify for the listener, this wasn't some kind of ancient crime scene.
No.
The Maya practiced a ritual called secondary burial. When a family member died, they would be buried somewhere else initially. Later, once the body had decomposed, the family would exhume the defleshed bones of their ancestors and rebury them beneath the floors of new locations.
Which sounds intense to us, but for them it was deeply meaningful.
Very much so. The purpose was to sanctify the new structures, literally embedding the power, history, and presence of their family lineage into the very foundation of the home.
But the bones themselves weren't actually the treasure here. In that buried skull, archaeologists found a lower incisor. And still firmly attached to that 1,200-year-old tooth was ancient dental plaque.
Dental calculus is honestly an archaeologist's best friend.
It's gross, but awesome.
It really is. When we brush our teeth, we are fighting plaque. But if you don't brush, that plaque mineralizes. It turns into calculus, like a hard cement. And while that is terrible for your gums, it acts as a perfect microscopic time capsule.
Because it traps everything, right?
Exactly. It traps food particles, starches, and even DNA from the person's diet.
I just love that poor dental hygiene is basically a gift to modern science. Because when researchers ran a chemical analysis of the food particles trapped in that specific plaque, they didn't just find traces of basic corn mush.
No, they did not.
They extracted a menu, an incredibly rich, diverse menu. They found the chemical signatures for complex stews and soups, squash, beans, various tree fruits, and chili peppers.
And the implication of that dietary profile is profound. This was absolutely not a subsistence diet of basic, low-protein corn rations that a struggling peasant farmer would rely on to survive.
Right, this is luxury dining.
It is. The bounty represented in that microscopic plaque proves that the residents of this hilltop estate were eating incredibly well.
Mm.
It confirms the working theory that these people were major plantation owners.
Wow.
They were operating extensive, highly successful, and diverse farms in the fertile valley below their hilltop mansion, producing surplus crops for trade.
So they have the stone McMansion, they have the rich, diverse diets, they are living the dream.
They really are.
But there's a massive catch. To run a massive, wealthy plantation, you need one crucial ingredient above all else: water. And this brings us to a mind-bending geographical paradox for the Pook region.
It's one of the most fascinating environmental challenges in the ancient world. The soil in the Pook region is incredibly fertile, much better than the thin, poor soils of the southern lowlands. It's an absolute paradise for agriculture.
Okay, so what's the catch?
The region has absolutely zero surface water. There are no rivers, there are no lakes, there are no streams, no creeks.
None. Literally zero. How do you have a jungle with no rivers?
Because of the geology. The Yucatan Peninsula is essentially a massive, thick shelf of porous limestone. It acts like a giant geological sponge.
Ah, so it just drains.
Exactly. Any rainwater that hits the ground immediately drains away through the rock into deep underground aquifer systems. In some parts of the Maya world, the surface collapses to form sinkholes called cenotes, allowing access to that groundwater.
Right, I've seen pictures of people swimming in those.
Yeah, they're beautiful. But in the Puke region, the water table is hundreds of feet down. It was completely inaccessible to ancient people. Furthermore, the climate is brutal. Rain falls heavily for 6 months of the year, and then it completely stops. Virtually no rain falls for the next 6 months.
If you have ever tried to keep a small garden alive during a 2-week drought, imagine running a massive agricultural empire on a porous limestone rock with zero surface water for 6 months.
It seems impossible.
The residents of Stairway to Heaven were operating like extreme off-grid survivalists, but with ancient high-tech engineering. If they couldn't pump water up from the ground, they had to capture their wealth directly from the sky.
Yes, they depended entirely on controlling, collecting, and managing rainwater. And to do this, they engineered incredible underground cisterns called chultans.
And the mechanics of the Chultan system are just pure genius. First, the Maya had to bore a hole straight through the hard limestone caprock on the surface. Once they break through that crust into the softer, chalky marl rock underneath, they excavated outward.
They carved huge, cavernous, bell-shaped chambers underground.
But obviously, an underground hole carved into porous rock won't hold water. It would just drain away. So the final stage was waterproofing.
And this brings us back to that thermodynamically expensive stucco we discussed earlier.
Oh, right, the quicklime.
Exactly. They lined the entire interior of these massive underground chambers with a thick, specially formulated pinkish stucco. This created a perfect waterproof seal.
But you can't just dig a waterproof hole and hope a rain cloud parks directly over it. This is the part that completely blows my mind. The Maya expertly engineered the entire surrounding landscape.
Very intricate.
Every single patio, every rooftop, every stone plaza on that hilltop estate, they graded and slanted the architecture specifically to act as a massive funnel. They directed every single drop of rainfall into a network of these underground cisterns. The entire hilltop functioned as a giant, interconnected rain barrel.
The scale is remarkable. At the Stairway to Heaven estate alone, archaeologists mapped 8 massive chultans scattered throughout the property, all fed by this topographical grading.
And using 3D modeling, engineers calculated the actual volume of those chambers. Each of those 8 chultans could hold up to 10,000 gallons of water.
Which brings us to the math of survival. 80,000 gallons is a massive number, but how far does that actually go in a society without running water?
Let's run the numbers.
Historical estimates suggest a typical ancient Maya family of 6 consumed about 27 gallons of water a day for drinking, cooking, and basic washing.
Okay, so 80,000 gallons divided by 27 gallons a day.
Those cisterns could comfortably support 7 families through 3 entirely rainless months. And with careful rationing, they could easily stretch it through the entire 6-month dry season.
That is just incredible.
It is. This mastery of water management was not just a convenient public utility, it was the literal liquid foundation that allowed this middle class to exist. It allowed them to farm on a massive scale during the wet season and thrive securely on their hilltops during the dry season, completely insulated from the drought outside their walls.
So let's take a step back and look at the journey we've been on in this deep dive. We started down in the mud, looking at the fragile, melting wattle and daub huts of the ancient commoners in the south, carrying heavy stones on their backs with tump lines.
Right.
And we traveled north to discover the resilient, thermodynamically expensive, stone-built McMansions of the Kiwi middle class. We saw how their ingenuity, specifically their brilliance in hydrology and capturing the rain, literally birthed a brand new social class.
It completely challenges our preconceived notions of ancient history. It shows us a society that was far more dynamic, far more complex, and in many ways, far more modern in its social mobility than we ever gave it credit for.
And for you listening, I think there is something deeply relatable here. That core desire for upward mobility, the drive to build a better, more secure life for your family, to leave something permanent behind that isn't just a modern phenomenon born in the Industrial Revolution.
No, not at all.
It's a deeply human trait, and it was thriving, alive and well, in the jungles of the ancient Americas over 1,000 years ago.
The Maya dream was a tangible reality. It was built on burned stone, fueled by diverse agriculture, and sustained entirely by captured rain.
And that reliance on rain brings up a really haunting thought to leave you with today. We marvel at their engineering, but it also highlights the intense environmental fragility of this middle class.
Absolutely.
Their entire upward mobility, their stone houses, their rich diets, it was all perfectly balanced on the assumption of predictable seasonal rainfall. If the climate shifts and that rain stops falling for a few years, those 80,000-gallon cisterns run dry and that entire social class collapses.
It really makes you think.
It makes you look at our own modern middle class today. When future archaeologists dig up your neighborhood in 1,000 years, what highly prized but perishable parts of your life will have vanished into the dirt, and what stone monuments will be left behind to tell the story of your social class?
A sobering but incredibly important question to consider as we look to the future.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We always love exploring these hidden corners of history with you. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and take care.